Cool. All right. So welcome everybody. We're at week two. Already had some good questions. And our Q&A session was last Thursday. I think we had a couple folks show up. And I think we all learned a lot of stuff, including me, about some of the tooling and some of the stuff that's easy to do in Comfy and some of the stuff that's hard to do in Comfy. And this week we'll kind of be following along that same path. I think we'll look at some stuff that's really easy to do, and then we'll look at some stuff that's harder to do, and then we'll look at some things that there are existing nodes that help us work on. Some of them we'll need to install ourselves and run Comfy. Some of them we'll already have. And I think just like learning how Comfy thinks, or how the community has sort of built up Comfy to be like, this is our expectation of how you do debugging, or how you even see values coming out of your pipes and your nodes, is kind of helpful to see. So we'll definitely look at some of that today. So actually, before we jump into like the lecture stuff for today, maybe it would be good for me to actually just show what Sam was asking me about. So Sam's question was essentially like, how do we get back to like the metadata that we had from our image, right? So like, if we know we had a seed image from our tool, like how do we get back to that? And kind of the interesting thing is that Comfy actually embeds all of the metadata for the entire workflow in every output image. So let me show you here. I have an output image from our session on Thursday. Let's see, where is it? Maybe I don't have it. Maybe I deleted it. But well, anyway, what I can do here is let me just look if there's a Comfy file here. Name king. It's Comfy. G. Yeah, so here's a good one from like, it's probably from a long time ago. Let's see if this works. So if I drag this in to Comfy and just drop it anywhere, you'll see it rebuilds the entire workflow. And in fact, what it'll also give us is it will give us the seed values for these images. Now, the problem here, or the challenge here, is, and we learned this in our session, the problem is this seed value is tied to the immediate like generation. As soon as I hit Q prompt, because this control after generate is set to randomize, it's actually going to remove that and move it to the next value. This is my most frustrating thing about ComfyUI is I want the seed value of right now, or of the most latest iteration. And if you set this to control after generate to randomize, you'll lose it. So you actually kind of have to copy the seed value now. And then when you generate the image, sorry, this is because it's an old workflow, it's going to throw an error. This will grab this will run, and it will show you a new image, and then it'll reset the seed value. For whatever reason, the way seeding and image outputs work is like really frustrating in Comfy. And it's like, to me, the most basic thing. Like, I like this image. What was the seed value from it again? And you can't really get it from anything without doing this stuff. There's this other tool that we were looking at on Thursday, which is let's see, just metadata. Load image with metadata. And you can drag in this image, or in this node, and then you can get out the raw metadata here. So we want metadata, show metadata. That's not the right one. Oh man, this is where we ran into issues. Again, just finding what the right tool is here was the biggest challenge. I have this workflow. Let's just pull it in. And I'll share this with everyone as well in case you want it. Should be down here somewhere. Clearly showing how good of a job I do with managing my workflows right now. So we want workflow. Let's do JSON. And this is, I think, metadata. Let's look up that. Nope, not any of these. I don't know where this went off to. Must have deleted it by accident. Well, that sucks. Well, I will go and rebuild it because it's actually really helpful for us to see. And the challenge here again, and we spent like probably half an hour on Thursday just trying to figure out like what node to connect with this. So I think it was, let's see if this gives me options here. Huh. I'm completely blanking on what the image was. But anyway, this connects to an output of a raw metadata that you can then display anywhere.
It was
and actually,
metadata
sorry, what was it?
extractor.
Metadata extractor, of course, because that's what you would want to use, right? There you go. Yes, correct. So
And
metadata
then,
extractor,
yeah, and then
and then it
show
was
me,
display any. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
show me value
display
to
any.
console. I
Yes,
screenshot
okay.
it.
Thank you. Good. I'm glad you did it. Apparently I should have. So if we want just our metadata here, so we can upload our image. So choose file to upload. We can upload this image that I made earlier today. Kind of noisy. We can deal with that later. And then we can output directly from here, say file info, workflow, prompt value. There were some other things we were also looking at, which I can't remember. We were able to look at just the seed value, I thought, at one point. But let's do this anyway. So let's go raw to, let's just go workflow to output. So, and also I'm gonna have to bypass all this other stuff. So let's just delete it. Because the other thing is, because we have a Q prompt, it has to run something. So it starts by trying to run that error prone like thing that I've got there. Again, why Comfy does it this way is a little frustrating. But from here, I can get out my values from this image. And if we look in here, I'm sure seed is set up somewhere in here. Let's just see if we can find seed. There we go. So this was set to a seed of 0. Okay, great. That's really helpful there. But this is kind of one of the challenges of Comfy is like you can do all this stuff, but you have to find the right name node and you have to find the right thing it connects to get out everything you want to, which I find just to be quite frustrating. But you can do it. There are other nodes actually, and I might show another node a little bit later, not this class, but maybe a later class. There's one that allows you to add notes to any image you output. So what people end up doing is dumping the seed into that. So the seed is visible when you scroll through your images, which is kind of hacky, but it does work. So yeah, so I will rebuild this workflow and save it. Actually, I'll save this now, but I feel like I definitely have a better one somewhere else. So I'll grab that one as well for everyone, and I'll share it as part of this class in our class channel. Cool. So that was already sort of 10 minutes of me frustratingly like digging around Comfy, which happens all the time. That should really be the class, is me just showing up and showing you how stupid I am when it comes to this tool as well. Cool. So we're gonna get started with this week's material, and then we'll mostly focus on us being able to get more control out of our images. So let me go ahead and share this with everybody in our chat. And we'll probably be jumping directly into Comfy quite quickly. So I would recommend maybe if you haven't yet started up Run Comfy, go ahead and do that now, because I know it takes a couple minutes to get started. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do this week, and then we'll just dive right in. So this week, we're going to look at what we call the conditioning chain, which is mostly around prompting. I don't want to make this class a prompt engineering class because that's like a 4-week class in and of itself. But we will talk a little about how Comfy has some unique options through nodes that allow us to do certain things with prompting that you can't really do with other tools, or that has to be specially built for those tools. So we'll look at that. Then we'll look at image to image, which is like just a really popular way for us to maintain a little bit more control over our images. And also understanding how image to image works so we can do a lot more with sort of our K-sampler tree. This will allow us to do in the future upscaling. It'll allow us to do different runs of different models on top of each other, which is kind of interesting. And then we'll wrap up class. We'll talk about LoRAs. The goal for this week will be like you can try to train your own LoRA, and I'll talk about what LoRA is before we get there. So you can try. So next week you can load in your own LoRA. We can try making custom, sort of like mini models or like little extensions. So Claire, there are ways to make custom Python nodes in Comfy. I might save that for the very last week of class because it's definitely a little bit more of an advanced discussion. But you can definitely make your own custom stuff in Comfy with nodes, which is pretty cool and pretty powerful. But like anything, it has a syntax you have to sort of get used to. But there are ways to do that. Yeah. So we'll talk about LoRa's. We'll talk about training a LoRA. So I'll show you some options on training a LoRA this week, and then next week hopefully you've trained a LoRA and we can load it into Comfy and see how that works. So basically you have our own custom image generator in a particular style or with our own faces or that sort of thing. As I mentioned, like, I don't really want to turn this into a completely about prompt engineering because that's, again, like a different class. I taught a class about a year ago that was called Words or Images. The technology or the models we were using then is a little out of date. But a lot of the concepts around prompt engineering and image to image and that sort of thing are all also in that playlist. So if you're interested and you have a couple hours to kill, there's a whole like 8-week class of videos that you can go and watch. And that uses this tool called Auto 1111, which I've actually been recommending to a couple folks. If you are more in the space of like, you want to automate stuff and you don't necessarily need a visual version of that, Auto 1111 is actually probably a better tool in those cases. So it covers a lot of that tooling. That tooling hasn't really changed that much in the past year. They've just added more tabs. Like it's just one of those interfaces that is just like littered with tabs. But it's cool to use and it does allow actually like some better API usage or like looping structures and that sort of thing. So if you're interested in that, you can check out that whole like series of videos there. I also just finished this video. I've been sitting on it for like 4 or 5 months. So this is a really great opportunity for me to just like kick myself in the ass and finish it. That's basically just a general introduction to prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is last week we tried a dog riding a dolphin and we got some pretty crappy results. Sometimes we got good results, but mostly we got crappy results. Prompt engineering is like what words do we need to add into that to make our image more photorealistic or more stylistic, or how do we look at certain things like prompt weighting or that sort of thing. We'll cover some of that today, but there's a lot more sort of theoretical stuff and other options in this video. I made this video for a private workshop I was teaching that was actually more on Midjourney. So it's a little bit more Midjourney focused, but there's still a lot of material in there that would work, that is conceptually working for this group as well. So take a look at that if you're interested in that. Actually, a lot of what we're going to try to do for the next couple weeks is like completely remove the need for prompt engineering using other nodes and other techniques. But pretty much every tool for text to image starts with a prompt. So at least understanding how another tool might want to be prompt engineered is helpful to understand. Skip that. So we will talk a little about prompting this week. But I have to be honest with you, I fucking hate text prompting. I think it's like one of the worst interfaces I can imagine as an artist. Trying to guess the right word that a machine knows is like, I don't know, it's just like a terrible way to operate. It's a fun, like sort of conceptual challenge, but if you actually really want to do good work, it's really hard. And there's actually starting to be a good amount of research and evidence that shows that the way these models, quote unquote, think, or the way that like text is embedded in these models does not correlate to how a human thinks about things. If you reverse engineer some of these LLM models and look at the way that it connects different words together, it doesn't really make sense to us. And that means that like at best, if we're trying to control these models, these really powerful models, purely through language, like at best, it's a hack. At best, we are trying to like match up a human speaking language with a machine language, and it just really doesn't work as well as like we want. I would say a lot of like what people are doing today is they're trying to force models to speak more like human. And that's almost like kind of like removing some of the capabilities of these tools. So starting this week, we'll start to build up a bunch of nodes that allow us to do things where we don't really need to worry about handcrafting our own nodes or handcrafting our own prompts. We can start to build up our own prompting tools that will do prompting for us that hopefully are speaking more the machine language. But there are concepts and tools that we'll look at, and I think that gets to better prompts. And most of these interfaces are still prompt based, so you could even learn a lot of stuff that works here that you could then take outside of Comfy. A lot of the nodes we're going to look at today are also accessible via some like Hugging Face or are their own tools in and of themselves. So we can look at those tools as well. So what you'll learn here is also applicable outside of Comfy, but it's kind of nice that Comfy does it all in one place. It's kind of a tool chain that like adds a bunch of features all in one place and allows you to do some pretty complex stuff together. All right, so the first thing we're gonna look at is prompt weighting. I don't know how many people have used like a tool like Midjourney or a tool that actually supports prompt weighting. But prompt weighting is the idea that like last week, we were looking at that dog riding a dolphin, right? And we kept getting dolphins. And it would have been nice to like say, hey, actually what I really want to emphasize right now is the dog. Can you like put a little bit more weight behind that? And that's the concept of prompt weighting. the biggest frustration is that every tool has a different syntax for how prompt weighting works. I think Midjourney is double colons. So you put in double colons and you put in like an integer value after it. Other tools support the syntax we're going to use here, which is that you put stuff in parentheses, and then the weighting value is usually between like 0.0 and 2.0. So like half the challenge is figuring out like what's the right syntax for prompt weighting. The nice thing I'd say about Comfy, and we'll look at this in 2 minutes, is that Comfy has some shortcuts. In traditional, like if you're running locally or on Colab, the shortcut for prompt weighting is the control button and the up or down arrow. So if you want to add weight to a text or phrase, you do control up or control down. In Run Comfy, because control up is actually a browser function, you actually have to do control option up and control option down. It just makes everything more complicated, right? But that's really the only shortcut I remember in Comfy, in part because I bounce between Run Comfy and my own local instance, and it changes a lot. But if you are like one of those hardcore, like I need to know every shortcut person, someone has documented what most of the Comfy shortcuts are here. And there are a bunch of them. So for example, I do try to use the copy selected nodes and then paste selected nodes while maintaining connections. This one's actually really helpful. And I think with Run Comfy, all you have to do is add the option key to all of these. So if you do option control C, that will copy the selected nodes, and then option control shift V will paste with the incoming connections. So basically it copies all the connections as well, which is nice. So let's just take a look at how to use this in Run Comfy really quickly. And we'll see how prompt weighting works. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to Run Comfy. I'm just going to close out and hide some of this stuff so we got a little bit more of a better workspace to work with. And I'm going to go ahead and hit load default. This will just load in our default workflow, which we looked at last week. And I'm going to go back to my quote here, or my prompt of a dog riding a dolphin. And I want to make sure this is set to my 1.5. I think we found out that the Stable Diffusion XL models do a much better job with this prompt. I would say in general, as models have gotten more newer, progressively like better architecture, stuff like conceptual ideas of a dog riding something is much more easily solved by sort of new models. But we're going to go back to like an old school one of SD 1.5. And that was what I was testing with last week, and we saw that it wasn't working that well. So let's just queue up one of these and run it. It's going to take a second to load our checkpoint. And there we go. There's our terrible dolphin thing, dolphin blob. I'm going to cheat because I remember that the fixed seed of 100 generated a decent image for me. So I'm going to go back to this. So here we have, and I can make my image bigger by just grabbing the corner here and making it bigger. So here I have a person riding a dolphin, which gets me closer to what I wanted, but I really want a dog. So if I go over to the dog word in clip and highlight it, and then I go, what is it, control option up, you'll see that what it does for me is it adds this sort of, in parentheses, it says dog : 1.05. That means weight it a little bit more. So if I highlight this again, I think I just highlight this whole thing, and I do control option up, it now goes to 1.1. I have cranked this up to like 1.25, and then let's run this again. And there we go. I now have more of a dog shape here. You can also negatively prompt something. So let's say, let's try something else. So let's say a dog riding a dolphin, ocean waves, sunset. So we go, now I have a sunset. Let's say the sunset is too strong. So what I could do here is I could select that word and do control option down, and that's going to negatively weight this. So it's going to give me, it should hopefully give me less sunset. But it's kind of hard to imagine what less sunset means. So I mean, it's kind of hard to like figure out if that is less sunset. The sun is smaller, I guess. So quite really like literally it made me a smaller sunset. I can make this even smaller. You can also edit these numbers directly. So let's try this with a very small amount of sunset. Nah, it didn't really change much. Weighting is kind of it's a tricky game, right? This is basically because of our noise amounts. So there's probably like a white spot here in the noise that is becoming this sunset. I can't really remove it completely, especially because I'm asking for it, right? So it's like kind of hard to balance out these weights. But you can find that by playing with this, you can emphasize certain things. Let me go back to a randomization here and see if we can get more dog and less sunset by running this again. Well, I'm getting a dog. It's not riding the dolphin, but it's at least like there's no sunset here either. There's no dog there whatsoever. I think we discovered that noise has a really strong effect on this particular prompt, especially in SD 1.5. Like you really need some like brown noise here to generate a dog. Not even close to having a dog. There's a dog head on a dolphin in a sunset. So, it's working a little bit. We can also add weighting to our negative prompts. So instead of let's say that we don't want any waves whatsoever, what we could do here is we could actually say waves, and we could positively strengthen the negative. So it gets kind of confusing, but essentially what we're saying is I really don't want any waves in my image. So we could do shift option or control option up, crank that up, and then hit Q prompt. And it's still got some waves there, but it's not splashy. It's just like straight up in the air. So we could see what this looks like. Run it a couple more times. Ooh, that is a creepy looking thing. There's very little wave, so it's kind of working. Yeah, less splash, just a little bit of ripple. There we go. There's our weird guy again. Wonder why we can't generate a dog more there. Let's crank this one up really high. If you crank stuff up really high, sometimes it just like obliterates the image. We crank it up to 2.5. Let's see. And actually, I just already see this is a case where I want that seed again, but I already lost it because it's already moved on to the next image. So I have to go load this up and figure out that. So we'll just say screw it. We'll hopefully get something that is interesting. Yeah. So if you crank up your weights too high, you tend to get these very like abstract images because it's just sort of like cranking this up to 11, and it's honestly like even further than it can really generate. I don't know, maybe that's a cool effect, but it definitely leads to like all sorts of problems. So I generally keep my like thing between like 0.5 and 1.5. 1.5 is still really crispy. You're going to get a loud image there, a very dog-like image, which is kind of interesting. And it's going to maybe obliterate your dolphin. You could, of course, also try to bring the dolphin back in by trying to prompt this up, by trying to turn the weight up on this. Again, now you're just like having competing shouting matches with each other with the model. You're just shouting on top of each other until you get, I don't know, something that's, you're starting to notice like what we call crispiness, which is like, it's like over sharpened. That tends to happen a lot when you crank up your weights too much. You could try, the other way to counterbalance this is to turn your CFG score down. But these are all like, you're just trying to balance out really loud sounds. But that's prompt weighting. So, if you're really stuck and you like are just like, I think it's close, but I just need a little bit of a boost in the text prompt, adding a little bit of weighting to your prompt can do a lot for you. So I'll save this out. Call it weighting. Cool. So next is this idea of prompt combining. And this is actually the first thing that I think that Comfy does really well, and as an interface is different than what you could do in other things. Prompt combining is this idea that you can have multiple prompts and you can combine them and weight them in interesting ways. The sort of classic use case for this, and again, this is probably more of an artifact of older models and happens less and less in new models, is let's say that I have a prompt that says a dog in a red hat in a city. The way that especially older models tended to work with language is they don't necessarily see this as red hat. They see it as a dog, red, hat, city. And they try to generate that image. And what it ends up generating then is an image with a lot of red in it. Because it sees the word red quite early in the prompt, it's going to end up generating like, I don't know, like a red brick background. And the dog is going to be reddish brown. And that's kind of like, not what we're saying here. We want a red hat on this dog. So what we can do then is we can look at prompt combining to actually see if we can affect that in a smart way. So this sort of like, these prompts kind of separate out different concepts and combine them in a way that is actually closer to what we're looking to do. So let's take a look at this. This is again one of those things that is like, it happens like 50% of the time, and then other times it's like not actually a big deal. We can go ahead and just copy this. Let's just copy this prompt and see what we get with this. So let's go ahead, a dog and red hat in a city. And I'm just going to go back to my default here. So I'll paste this in. And we'll leave it at, we'll use 1.5 again. And we'll just set this to random, and we'll see how much red we get in these things. So in this case, I do get a red hat. Let's try this a couple more times. So here you get, this is a good example of this, right? You can start to see that the dog is turning reddish, but also our background has some red influence in it. And it's also got this, I don't know what this even is, like a jacket, a bib, I don't know what you call that. And this is what you'll kind of see happen quite frequently is red gets influenced into other images. Now, it's not going to be every time, but you can start to see here the red is bleeding into our city background, that sort of thing. And here, like the coat is red. So I could try, like, let's try something else here. Let's try a dog in a red hat and a black jacket in a city. And let's see if it's actually able to make a red hat and a black jacket for us. No, see, it makes a red jacket because red is the first word in this order. So it learns to make dog, red, hat, black, jacket, city, and it kind of mashes those all up. So this is where we can look at something like prompt combining. So the way to do a prompt combine is we can copy and paste our nodes. So we actually are going to have two different clip text nodes, and we'll connect all this stuff together. So we're going to say here is a dog in a hat and a black and a jacket in the city. So let's actually start by this. So let's generate just this prompt. So plug in this conditioning node into our positive. And let's make sure that it generates a dog and a hat and a jacket in the city. Cool. So that's pretty cute. We have a dog in a hat, a jacket. I don't know, it got sunglasses as well. But let's say we want the hat to be red. Well, what we can do then is we can add in a red hat as our prompt. Now, you might think like, well, that's just going to generate just a red hat, right? And this is where we need to use these combined nodes. So the way to do this is we'll double click in here and we'll look for conditioning. And you'll see here that there's some things that say conditioning average, conditioning combine, and conditioning concat. Now I have to tell you, and I will show you a slide of this, the Mr. Comfy himself has explained how these work, and I couldn't tell you the difference between them. So it's kind of like you just got to play with them a little bit and see which one works for you in the right way. I assume each one of these is doing some sort of mathematic change to how it combines the prompts together. This one might be averaging before it actually does the denoising. I think combine might average after the denoise, and concat might be like combining them in interesting ways. I couldn't tell you, but I can just tell you like some of them work better than others. So I know the concat one works quite well. Actually, that's not the one I wanted. I want to combine. Conditioning, combine. Yes, cool. So this node you'll see here gives us a conditioning 1 input, a conditioning 2 input, and then an output of conditioning. So we can do then here is we can drag our first node into conditioning 1, our second node into conditioning 2, and then our output from this into the positive of our conditioning. And the hope here now is that we will get exactly what we want with a dog and a hat and a jacket, but the hat will be red. So let's try this. Didn't work. Okay, that one did. So again, especially with SD5 models, the noise has so much influence in these things. But this is able to sort of combine these in a way that like sort of tells us like something interesting here. We're able to work off this. We could actually add a third prompt. Let's say we always want a jean jacket. So what we could do here is we could add a third prompt. We call this jean jacket. Should I spell that right? I did. Connect our input node for the conditioning model. Then what we can do is we can copy this node. This is the other thing that's kind of weird about Comfy is there's no way to like say like, hey, can you just add a third input for me? You kind of have to like chain these things together. So in our first two nodes, we've got this one output here, right? So what we can do is we can put this into the conditioning one. We can take our gene jacket and put that into conditioning two. And then we can take this conditioning node and take the output into our positive. So now hopefully what we get here is always a dog in a red hat with a gene jacket. Well, we got a lot of gene jacket and a messed up looking dog. Closer. Yeah. So what we might actually have happening here is that this combine is adding too much of the gene jacket, or gene jacket is just like really strong in this model. So what we could do is we could actually try a dog in a gene jacket to try to emphasize the dog and see if that removes our person. Okay, pretty messy, but we're getting there. We have a dog with the hat mashed up in its face. There we go. Okay, so again, as we iterate on this, we can begin to play with like, oh, we actually need to change the text prompt a little bit to emphasize dogs. Or maybe in our negative, we could say humans, people, I don't know, whatever, women, men. We could try to have the negative influence the image as well.
Hey,
That's
Derek,
weird.
does
Yeah.
the word order matters with the influence of the prompts? Does the, whatever you put in conditioning one or two, does that order matter?
That's a great question. So again, this is the exact description from Mr. Comfy himself, which is that conditioning combine runs each prompt you combine and then averages out the noise predictions from them. Try conditioning concat instead. It might do more what you want. And then someone asked, like, does order matter? And he said the order doesn't actually matter. So this is barely legible to me. I can kind of understand what's going on, but the fact that there are three of them that all do slightly different things also is confusing to me. And I'm not entirely sure how each one of these works. So the other one that exists here is averaging. So let's look at conditioning averaging. Conditioning average. And here you'll see there's a way to even weight this a little bit. So this actually might be what we wanted maybe for that gene jacket issue. So we could try this. So let's put this back to gene jacket. And we could say, okay, this is our main one. And this is our second one. And conditioning two strength. We could set this to maybe be a lower value. And we could plug this in. And we don't actually need this guy now. I think it's actually supposed to be reversed. Let's try this. Conditioning from, conditioning to. Yeah. So the conditioning to strength is what you're moving toward. See, I feel like these are opposite of how I want them ordered, but basically you can move from this prompt combined into this one, and it should give you sort of an average of those two, but you can emphasize the where it starts from. It's pretty cute. I lose the red hat, but cute dogs. Okay. There is also this other one, which is the one that I think a lot of people use, which is conditioning concat, and it has the same thing, but you'll see here it's got no weighting value. So let's try this one as well. So let's try conditioning to, conditioning from, and our conditioning output. Yeah, see, we end up with, I guess we want to go back to our dog in a jean jacket. But we do lose that red hat. So I almost think in some ways the combines together was actually giving us a better result there. And this is basically what the Comfy Anonymous guy said. He said, just try them all and like figure out which one works better for you based on your prompt, which isn't super helpful and also doesn't explain how these work.
The nature of the game.
Exactly. Definitely the nature of the game for these. Yeah. Cool. Also, I'll say this one out. This is the combine. And actually, maybe I'll just move back to the one that worked well, which is conditioning and combine. And 2, 1, positive. Ooh, that one doesn't work well at all. Okay. We'll save this out as conditioning combine. All right, so that is the combining conditions. Next, we're going to talk a little about prompt masking and prompt area. So the concept for this one is like, what if we had a different prompt in different regions of our image, right? So this is kind of interesting. Again, this is like hard to do in a tool that doesn't have an interface or doesn't have a way to actually define regions. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll like define different regions of our image, and then we'll actually be able to blur some of this section together. So you can think about this as masking. There's also a tool for masking. I probably cover that one in a different video just so we've got it. But with this, we can actually just define mathematic regions or pixel regions and then play with it. So the other cool thing about this is you can also, SD 1.5 really wants to generate square images. But with this tool, we can actually generate square images that patch together to make a non-square image. So that's kind of nice. So let's imagine we've got like a horizontal image here. Let's say this is 768 by 512. And in our first 512 by 512 region, we define it as a beautiful, I don't know why it said this way, a beautiful scene of nature, a deep blue lagoon. And then next to it, we say, hey, I want a beautiful scene of nature, and I want a vast wheat field. What's kind of cool about this is like we're being able to make composable sections. We're able to say like, in this region, I want this. In this region, I want this. And it won't give us perfect results, but it'll begin to give us a way in which we can play with this. And actually, we'll come back to this when we start to do image to image, because there's even a way to like start with a really base rough sketch and then apply another model on top of it, which will make it look even nicer. So let's do this one really quickly. So we'll go back to Comfy. And I'm just going to copy the language I used here. I'm going to go back to my default. And also, I'm going to use one of the anime models. I found that like the anime stuff has some really nice, it's got that really nice Miyazaki kind of look for certain backgrounds. So I'm going to use the anything model, anything v3, but it's still an SD 1.5 model. So it's still really meant for us to use 512 by 512. And I'm going to make this image a horizontal rectangle. And let's just see what this generates when I just put in one of these prompts. Or let's see what happens when I put in both prompts together. So I'll put in both a beautiful blue lagoon as well as a vast wheat field, a beautiful nature scene. And if we generate this, it's going to take a second for us to load our new model in. So Golan, yes, the mask can be non-rectangular. That's where you would actually use, there's another node called masking. I'll show you how to use that one as well. But yes, yeah, you can make them non-rectangular. So here we have our prompts. And really all it did was kind of mash up, like that isn't even like a blue lagoon, it's just like a blue wheat field, right? So again, we have this color bleed into this thing where it doesn't know what a blue lagoon is, or it like got overridden by wheat. So here's where you could like go in and be like, okay, let me maximize the weight of lagoon, minimize the weight of the wheat, and like see if that fixes it. But actually, it's just better to say like, I want a blue lagoon here, and I want a wheat field here. And most of the models today are not good at location. You can't say on the left side of this image, do this, on the right side of the image, do this. We're starting to get to those models, like the new SD3 and the new Aura Flow are better at those, but they're still pretty far off. So in this tool, we can actually make a better example of like where we want our regions to be. So let's take a look at this. So for this, what we're going to do is we are going to use the set area. What is it called? It is called conditioning set area. And we're going to want two of these, right? We're going to want one for our left-hand side and one for our right-hand side. And if we look here, we basically have pixel values, and then we've got X and Y coordinates, and we've got strength. So before we build our prompts, let's just figure out our regions. So I know I want my two squares to be 512 by 512. And what I want to do is I want to offset my right side one by whatever 768 minus 512 is. I guess I could do that math, but the nice thing is you can do math directly in these nodes. So I want to offset it by 256. So this will then generate for us, we'll generate our two rectangles where we want to have this happen. Now, the nice thing here is what's going to happen is because we have both of these prompts working in this middle section, it's going to try to blend them. It's going to try to blend both those concepts together in the middle. And that's going to give us a softer image. It won't be perfect, I can promise you that, but it'll give us a softer blend between those two. So now let's go ahead and set up our prompts. So we're going to take this first prompt, and we'll put it over here. So we'll grab this one. And I'm actually going to invert my order here. I'm going to say a deep blue lagoon, beautiful nature scene. That's because text prompting usually looks at whatever is in the first part of the word the most. So whatever is earliest in the phrase is going to work best. And then here I'll say a vast wheat field. Beautiful nature scene. And I'll connect my clip model again here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to plug each one of these into our conditions. So I want my blue lagoon on the left-hand side. I want my wheat field on the right-hand side. And I'm going to delete this connection here. Delete. Cool. And now what we need to do actually is we need to use our combination conditioning again, because we want to say is we want to combine all of them together. So you'll see here that there's conditioning out. So we're going to use our conditioning combine. We're going to combine the 1 and the 2, and we're going to condition those into the positive. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. And let's go ahead and hit Q prompt. So you'll see, again, not the best blend for this one. Again, seeding is really important here. So if we were to mash this up a little bit more, this is good, right? That one's pretty good. You can still see the color artifacts from how the noising is sort of prompting. This is where we'll come back to this one. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save this image. We'll come back to this exact one, and we'll look at how to clean this up. Using image-to-image techniques, we can actually do a lot to clean this image up. But the underlying architecture here is really good, and that's what I can work off of. So we could also play with the strength of this a little bit. Let's say maybe the reason we're getting like this hard line here is I've got the strength too high. So we could reduce the strength here to 0.75 for both. We could say, okay, and let's do this. Again, we're getting that really harsh line there sometimes. Better, so-so. That one's pretty good, but actually the right side is a little bit more influenced. There's other things we could do here. We could try playing with a different sampler. Maybe try to increase our steps here a little bit. Yeah, that's getting more interesting. Again, it's not perfect. You can definitely see, if you know how this is built, you can see literally the thirds here, right? You can see the first third is all the lagoon, the middle third is trying to be both, and the right third is trying to be just the wheat field. And, you know, again, this is kind of the fun of these tools is you can kind of see how explicitly laid out it is. So let's actually look at, I'm going to save this out. We'll come back to this one because I think this one's actually really helpful for us to see how to improve upon these using multiple K samplers. So let's call this was set area. Cool. So Golan was asking, can we make them less than just rectangles? Can we make them shapes? Can we make them other things? And that is where we can use conditioning set mask. Now this is where it's going to get a little interesting. I'm going to have to define an image that I then can mask out. So let's look at how to do this. So for this, what we're going to do is, so we're going to set this, we're going to load in an image. So there's a load image node. This will allow us to bring in any image we want. I'm actually just going to bring in, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring in this image. Let's say we wanted to clean up this image. So let's save this one out. And I'll load this back in. And what we want to do here is if we right click on this node, you'll see that in here there is an open and mask editor tool. So Comfy has a built-in mask a masking making tool that allows me to open this, and it's going to let me sort of draw where I want to draw. Now, this is confusing to me because the inverse of this, Photoshop does it white as selecting mask. This tool does it black as selecting mask. So it kind of like takes me a little bit of time to figure this out. So what we want to do instead is let's just draw this. Let's make a little shape draw. So we're going to draw in where I want my lagoon to be. I'm just going to fill this in. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more fun. I'll be like, you know, this region down here. It will hit save to node. And there you go. This is where it's confusing. It's actually saying this is the mask, not this, which is not how I think about it, but that's kind of how the tool thinks about it. So we'll feed this mask into our mask input. We'll feed our blue lagoon back to this one because we want our blue lagoon to be over here. We're going to duplicate this node by just copying and pasting it. And we're going to, again, right click and hit open in mask editor. We're going to hit clear to clear the mask. And then we're going to redraw in this other mask. And remember, we want a little bit of overlap because that's what's going to give us sort of that nice looking sort of, well, nice-ish looking sort of blend in the middle. And obviously you could, I think there's another way to even feed this in as an alpha channel. The easiest way is just to use the mask editor, but I think you can also feed in alpha channel images. And it's just there's a different node for loading in those alpha masks. Okay, so that's this guy. We want to delete these set areas. Maybe a better way to do this is to this way. So this is our conditioning. And this is our mask. And they're both going into our conditioner here, our combiner. And we hit Q prompt. I can kind of see it. I don't know if you can. You can see the wheat field is like taking over this space and the lagoon is taking over this space. This is actually pretty good because the mask isn't super harsh here. It's okay here. But yeah, so you can see like you can begin to paint different regions. You could make a bunch more regions as well, right? Like you could easily duplicate these a couple more times and add new regions into the space and begin to make sort of a collage elements of these things. You could play even with the strength again a little bit. You could potentially have two regions that really overlap a lot and play with the strength of those to get different mixing and matching. But this is kind of a really fun way to begin to control sort of, you know, regions and the basic underlying shapes of these tools. Any questions about this one?
Can we use standard alpha masks with like alpha channel, or sorry, with gray values to represent a blend? Or
that's a good question. Let's see. Load alpha, load image as mask. I assume you could. I've never actually tried that. But maybe if you have one, like send it my way and we can try it. Because I would assume it would work, and I would assume we could also change if we go back to our mask editor, we could change the opacity. So I assume we can. Although it looks like, see, this is on a mask by mask basis that the opacity is affecting things. I don't know if that's visual or weighting. I think it's just visual. So yeah, we need to load it and try it, but I assume you can. I assume it would just give you slightly like, it would decrease the strength in the place where it's, you know, grayish or whatever.
I'll tinker with it. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, this load image as mask is just the same thing. And then you can choose the channel. So you could choose RGB or alpha, and then pass the mask out to your mask input. Cool, I'll save this one for everybody. All right, let's see what else we have here. All right, cool. So now we're going to get to some fun stuff. And actually, we need to install a different node for this. So the next thing we're going to look at is a tool called Clip Interrogator. You would think that like with all the crazy high-powered machines we have today, wouldn't it just be nice if we could just send an image to a model and say like, hey, can you define what this image looks like? Or like, how would you describe this image for me? And that's what this tool called Clip Interrogator will allow us to do. So Clip Interrogator will allow us to send an image to this model. It's a machine learning model. The model will then return what it thinks the prompt should be, and then we'll pass that into our prompt conditioner to be able to actually generate an image of a similar sort of style. So let's take a look at how to do this. The first thing we need to do actually is install this node because it doesn't come with run Comfy. In fact, for whatever reason, and I'm still kind of shocked that this happens, the only people that have this node are the folks from Eden. And if you're not familiar, Eden is Gene Kogan, who is like an old school machine learning AI art guy, and Xander Steenbrugge and a bunch of other folks that work with them. And they started a company about a year or two ago called Eden. And they have built up some really cool tools that all use Comfy under the hood. They just recently switched over from diffusers to Comfy. It's a whole other site. It's called eden.art. And they have a bunch of cool stuff here. I've started to do some tutorials on my YouTube page about this because they just have a bunch of fun ideas that are, again, they're not Comfy like UI experiences, but they all run Comfy under the hood from the engineering side of things, which is pretty cool. So we need to install this. So the way to install any new extension, for a lot of folks, if you are using local models, you probably have done this already. But for those of us on Run Comfy who haven't done loading or installing new tools before, the way to do this is to go over here to our manager. Go ahead and click on manager. And then we'll click in this center section called install custom nodes. And then what we're going to look for up here is we'll do a search for Eden. And you should see the author is AI Xander, that's Xander Steenbrugge. And if you click on the name here, this will open up the GitHub page where all these tools are. So you can look at it. Again, there are some security issues with some of these tools. If you don't know who Xander is, you might be like, why would I install this? So you can always look at the code and kind of debug it yourself if you want to. But I happen to know this is worthwhile, and I know all the guys that made it, so I know it's good. We'll come over here and hit install. And while this installs, I can tell you there's actually a bunch of tools that come with this. The one we're going to look at is the clip interrogator node, but they also have a bunch of other things like saving images in a certain way. This is because they want to save stuff with timestamps, so they're not just overwriting files all the time. They have some other ways to save some of these decodings. I think there's also some basic sort of like math and logic tools in here that are all really helpful to use as we get more and more complicated with our workflows. So this is now finished installing. You can see now we need to restart our ComfyUI instance. I just hit restart up here. The restart here seems to work okay, but then you've got to hit this other button anyway. So just come up here and hit the restart Comfy button in the left-hand corner. And it's going to say, hey, after you restart Comfy, you need to manually refresh your browser. So just say, okay. Close. It's going to reconnect a little bit. It needs to restart the system behind the scenes. And we'll just hit refresh on our browser. And it's going to reload everything for us. And now we want to make sure that we can actually access clip interrogator. So I'm just going to double click out here and I'm going to do clip_interrogator. Cool. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to load our default in because I don't really want all this masking stuff. So we'll load this in. Cool. So what clip interrogator allows us to do is allows us to load in an image. So let's start there. Let's find an image we want to load in. So I'm going to type in load image. And the nice thing about Run Comfy is it saves all of your previously uploaded images. So in a lot of cases, I can just go back to an image I've already previously been using. This is an image from, let's see if I have another one here. Yeah. This is an image from, I don't know if anyone knows the artist Jordan Belson. He was a filmmaker, makes some really beautiful videos. But I love using clip interrogator for abstract stuff because I'm like, how would I describe this? How the hell do I describe this image to a machine, right? It's like, I could say radiating lines, I could say blues and yellows, but like a machine might have a better idea of how I would describe this image. So this is where clip interrogator is really cool. So we'll double click over here and we'll do clip_interrogator. And the input is a image. So we'll feed our image in. And actually I need to do one other thing between here. I'm going to add a node and I'm going to, should I never know where to find it? Okay, let me just type it. It's called prep image for clip vision. Yes, that one. this uses a tool behind the scenes called Clip Vision, and Clip Vision requires a specific size of image to work properly. So this node just kind of does all the good processing behind the scenes. So if we feed this image in here and then we feed this image back to this, we don't need to really worry too much about what's going on in this other than where do we want to crop the image from. So I set the crop to center. I think Clip Vision takes like a 226 by 226 center cropped image to generate like its output. So this just kind of does all the processing behind the scenes. So now we've got our interrogator here. So what it's going to do is this is going to run a model behind the scenes for us and actually tell us what the model sees as in the image. And then we'll spit out a prompt for us that we can then use and put into our encoder here. So then the way that I like to do this is let's actually start by just debugging this. Let's see what our prompt is. So you'll see the full prompt and there's blip caption as well. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to plug these into some new nodes. So I'll drag and hit Shift Control. And I believe what I want to do is, nope, not there. Okay, of course. So we're going to type in display. We'll do display any. Display any is just like a nice like default debugger. Essentially, it'll just output anything that comes from these nodes. So we'll put this here and you'll see it allows me to connect gray to gray. And we'll copy and paste this here and we'll paste this in here. So there are two things that come out of Clip Interrogator. There is what they call the full prompt and there's the blip caption. And when I was just playing with this, I was like, I don't know which one I want to use. Like, what are these things? So in this case, what we'll do here is we'll just output this. We won't really use it yet. We'll at least be able to read what is actually coming through these things. So let's make our space a little bigger here because these prompts can be a little bit large. We'll hit Q prompt. This might take a little bit of time for us to run because it loads in a brand new model. So it takes a little bit of time, just the first time to get it set up. What do you want? Come here. Want to say hi to everybody? I know you haven't made an appearance yet. Come on. This bug. She yells at me all the time. That's why she's a bug. She can't see you. She just wants cuddles. Okay. So this ran, and if we zoom in here, we'll see. Ignore the bottom. It always needs to queue up everything, regardless of what flow I actually want it to do. So what we got out of the blip caption was a close-up of a clock with a lot of dots on it. Not exactly accurate, but it is interesting that it sort of thought it was a clock. And then we have here our source, which is that prompt. Because we've got this prepend blip caption turned on, it also then says 8mm film still, 1970s analog video, color film still, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bunch of stuff that I think is more accurate. So in this case, what we should probably do is let's turn off the prepend blip caption because I don't actually like this clock of a close of a clock or whatever. Run this again, and now it just removes that blip caption for us. So now what we can do is we can plug this into our prompt, right? Like let's just plug this source, this full prompt value into this node. Now the problem here, as you see, there's really no input here for like a text source, right? So what we need to do is we actually need to click on this node and then we'll right click on it. And down here, there is this section called Convert Widget to Input. So anything that's visual here is considered a widget. I don't know why they chose that term because I would describe this as a widget, but whatever. We're going to convert widget to input. And if we click on the little arrow here, it says convert text to input. So we click on that, and now we have a gray input here that is text. So now what we can do is we can actually just copy our full prompt node and plug that into the text. And now when we run this, it's actually just going to plug this full prompt back into our node here. And we run this over and over again and get different results. We'll look at ways to improve upon this even more, but this is already a pretty powerful tool, right? Now all we need to do is upload a single image. It will auto-generate our prompt for us, and it will feed that back into our system. What if there's like a certain like prompt that I want to add to this in addition to whatever I get from the Clip Interrogator? Like say I always want it to be black and white. Now what we can do is we can also look at this other node that is called the combine node. You might remember we had conditioning combine. Now we're going to use the prompt combine. And if that's not confusing enough for you, there's like 30 combine nodes. So let's double click here and we'll look for prompt combiner. That's what it's called. And it's from the Surge prompt combiner toolset. Man, comfy some days. So when we open this, we see we've got 2 different sections that we can enter in text prompts. We've got a separator, which is how do we separate out this logic or like whatever. And then we've got our output. So just like what we did with our clip text thing here, we can close this, make it a little bit smaller. We can right click on our prompt combiner and we can say convert widget to input. And let's say convert prompt 1. Actually, we're going to do prompt 2 and I'll explain why in a second. So we're going to convert prompt 2 to an input. And then we're going to plug in from clip interrogator our prompt. And then we'll connect the combined prompt into our text input here. The reason that I'd use prompt 2 here is what we want to add here in text is actually like the most important thing, right? So if we want like, again, remember that text to image models take whatever the first words are as the most important part of our prompt. So what this allows us to do is this is say like, I think that this thing is really, really important. I think, let's say radiating lines, black and white abstract. Oh, get over here, abstract. If I leave that as is, what's going to happen then is our output here. We can actually look at our output. Let's add another display any. Let's plug that in here. So when we run this guy here, Q prompt, we'll now see what happens here is we get radiating lines, black and white abstract, then we get our separator, and then we get all of our text prompt. Now, for whatever reason, it didn't really care that I asked for black and white radiating lines because I got radiating lines, but not color, not black and white. There we go. No, not black and white, but something. Yeah. So now we've got this really powerful tool where we are using clip interrogator to help us fill out the sort of expanse of our prompt, but I still have the power to control what I really want to see here. And this is like now really a tool that like, this would be really hard to do in any other tool. But just by connecting a couple nodes through Comfy, I can create this relatively like powerful experience or like relatively really like helpful thing. Like, let's say I really want this to be 3D, 3D shapes, Unity Blender. Now I kind of get the abstraction of this image, but like more powerful sort of, more of what I really want to see, which is like 3D. Interesting. I wonder what in this gives me. Oh, it's because it's saying color film still. Unfortunately, there's no way to like subtract that I know of. There's no way to subtract words from this. Like you can think about like a string matcher that you can then remove things from. I've yet to see anyone make a node that allows me to remove something from this text. It'd be cool if I could do that too, where like I could actually remove things from whatever comes out of this. Maybe I'll eventually build that myself too. But maybe I could come in here and say colorful in the negative prompt. See if that sucks away any of our color. It looks like it does. Yeah. Cool. Let's take a short break and then we'll come back and we'll finish out some of this stuff and then we'll talk about LoRa's. So let's maybe come back in, let's say 8 minutes. So like 17 after, and then we'll pick up where we left off from here. Cool. See you in a second. There are a couple of mentions in the So there were a couple mentions in the chat that I want to quickly talk about. So first off, Golan mentioned that there's a way to input the images into our model as well. We'll look at that next. It's actually called img2img. So we'll look at that. And I think even combining that plus clip interrogator together is also really cool. I forgot that we can upload workflows. I forgot that you can attach files to Zoom chats now. So I added all of the workflows that we've currently made. I will also make like a drive folder of them, just so you'll have them and for archiving purposes. But you can grab those there, and then later tonight I'll add them all to a drive, and I'll post a link as well in our channel, so you'll be able to access those. And then yeah, like Sean mentioned that he was impressed that he was able to feed an image into clip interrogator, and you can see the images in our chat. They're quite beautiful. That is able to take the GAN smear and sort of like still knew the colors. I think the reason why that is, and here's you can actually get clip interrogator outside of Comfy. It's made by this guy by the name of Farmer Psychotic, a wonderful name. And he continues to add to it. And basically what he's doing is he's loading in the exact same clip models that are used by Stable Diffusion. So remember, Stable Diffusion has what is called the VAE, which is how it generates images. It has the clip model, which is how it does the text to image generation. And then it has the UNet model, which is also like part of the image generation. But what he is basically doing is he's reversing the sort of flow through the clip model, so you can feed an image out rather than have an image scoring system. Or like you feed an image to it, you get the text back, rather than what you would do now is you would feed an image plus the text and get out a score. But because he's using the exact same models that the Stable Diffusion tools are already using, he's likely, like, you're getting back certain keywords or certain phrases that I think also trigger these color changes. So even though it's not saying purple, orange, blue, it's saying other words that the model has sort of learned to understand and say as purple, oranges, and blues. And that's what's really fascinating about open source tools, right? Is because we know what models are being used with all this stuff. Someone like Pharmapsychotic is able to say like, oh, well, let me just reverse engineer this and get out the words rather than putting in words and images. So this version is actually different than what the Comfy version is, but you can open this and replicate and play with it. And it says, for Stable Diffusion 1, you're going to use VITL. For Stable Diffusion 2, you're going to use VITH. And for Stable Diffusion XL, you're going to use the VITB, big G. And these are just the clip models that are being used by those models themselves. I assume eventually we'll get one for what is being used for Stable Diffusion 3 as well. So, it's pretty cool that you can just play with this stuff and sort of, I don't think that this model, the clip interrogator, I don't think allows us to pick exactly what model we're using. I think by default, it might just default to that smallest one. Which means it might work better for SD 1.5 than XL or whatever. Someone could probably make a new version of this node that would include the different model choices. But that's what I think is essentially happening, is that because it's using the exact same models, even keywords that don't infer color are actually inferring certain outputs by just the nature of how these models are trained. Pretty interesting you can do that. I did also want to mention that clip interrogator comes with 2 different modes. We were using the fast mode, which is fast, as you can imagine. There's also a full mode, which I think is giving me just different prompt words. I wouldn't say they're necessarily better, they're just different. So you could also play with this and see if you get out different results. Like I had set it to full, and I was sharing more like these like more mirrored kind of images. So, you can play with it and get different results out of it depending on what model you use. Where this would be a challenge is if you're on a local instance and you only have like 12 gigabytes of VRAM, this might be loading in a really large model and you might crash your VRAM if you're trying to generate video or other things with it. So one of the nice things about, run Comfy is we can say like, oh, I'm going to generate video this week, so I'm going to upgrade to an extra large instance and just load in like a lot of models. If you're on a local and you're on like the smallest GPUs, you might have some issues where you're trying to load in too much. There's also this option here that says keep model alive. I assume that means it's like cached into your VRAM. If you're hitting a bunch of VRAM errors, you could turn this off and maybe save yourself a little bit of VRAM to generate with. There's lots of little techniques on how to like save yourself VRAM, because a lot of people are trying to use these tools on like 8 gigabyte cards, and they really aren't meant to like manage that. People are finding lots of different ways in Comfy to like offload stuff, then reload it, like all that sort of thing. I won't cover any of that because I don't care about that. But if you're interested, there's probably lots of people in Discords and things that really are focused on those sort of things. Okay, so there's one other tool I wanted to show that's sort of like clip interrogator. that's called Moondream. Moondream, unlike Clip Interrogator, which is actually using a Clip model, Moondream is just an LLM, like ChatGPT, like Claude. It's just meant to help you provide captions for images. So in this case, we do need to install this. We'll install this one as well. It's not exactly the same as Clip, but if you're just looking for how to describe an image, it can be an interesting tool to use. So let's look at how to install this one. Go back to Run Comfy. Oh, the other thing I should mention is Jorge mentioned that he was not able to find the prompt combiner. And that might be because I installed a node that didn't come pre-installed. So let me just quickly show you how to do that as well. So if you can't find the prompt combiner node, let's go to our manager, and then we'll go to install custom nodes. And then you can search for this name, Surge, SEARGE. And you'll see this node extension pack called Surge SDXL. And then if you don't see these 3 buttons, you see an install button, that means it isn't installed. Like everything with Comfy, it's like frustrating that like an extension pack called SDXL actually has a really helpful node in it that has nothing to do with SDXL at all. But so it goes. Usually these creators just create their own packs and like they make them available to other people, but it's got a bunch of other stuff in it. So that's the one for this one. If we want to install Moondream, we're going to come over here and type in Moondream in our search. And we want the first one. We want this one by Kijai. So it's ComfyUI Moondream. So we'll hit install here. And now we need to restart Comfy, so we'll hit restart. Okay. And then we'll refresh our browser. And now what we can do is we can add the Moonbeam node. So let's add Moonbeam up here. Moondream. We want Moondream query. And the way this works is just like any other chat LLM. You basically ask it a question, but you can pass in your image to it. So we're going to pass in our image here, and we'll say, what is this? Or like, how would you describe this image? And then for the model, we want to switch this to Moondream 1. Unfortunately, there's a bug right now with Moondream 2. If you set to Moondream 2, you're going to just constantly get errors, unfortunately. And then what we can do is let's add another anything node. So let's copy and paste this node here, and we'll output this, and we'll see what the output from Moondream is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit qprompt. We might get an error this first time. One of the challenges with Moondream is it doesn't download all the files until you run it the first time. So it's going to download all the LLM files we need, and it'll probably time out. Like basically, we won't be able to download everything in the time that's trying to run this node. So it'll give us an error saying the model isn't loaded, and then we'll just run it again, and it will actually work the second time. Yes, Sam, that's a great question, or a great notice, which is that if you have a workflow that doesn't have the nodes installed, you can go into the manager and install them. I actually recorded a video this week on how to do that. So it's sort of extracurricular from outside of this. But if you want it, you can go ahead and watch that video and explain sort of that process. We'll probably look at some of that when we get to later weeks in class, where we will be loading in other people's workflows, and we'll find a bunch of errors with this. So see here, I got this error message of no model found. That's because it's still downloading the model in the background, and it sort of times out. If we hit close, maybe wait a minute or two, and then we hit qprompt again. Let's see, trust remote. I think we're still running error. We're still it's still downloading in the background, so we're still gonna have some issues here. So let's wait another minute or two and see if that fixes it. You can also check to see if the model is loading correctly, as you can go over here in our Finder. This is like the browser of our Run Comfy instance. If you double click on ComfyUI, then Comfy Nodes, and then you can go in here and you can see ComfyUI Moondream, checkpoints, Moondream 1. And it looks like it's loading a bunch of stuff in. So it might just be taking another minute for this to load. I find for a reason run Comfy, like they're probably using like wget or something, and it's just really slow on their system for whatever reason. Let's try this again. This really worked earlier today. Why is it not working now? Did anyone else get it to run? I wonder if it's like an instance thing where I'm on a new, you got it to run? I think this extra large is like an slightly older, out of date instance where maybe they fixed this within Comfy. So if I get it to run another instance, I will show you what it looks like. It just is going to spit out a description of what the image is. And then you could do the exact same thing here where you could, oh, what's in it? Yes, sorry, yes. The instance is display any, so display any RG3. Thanks, Sam. I just copy and paste, and it usually has the title here, but for these it doesn't. Let's give this one more try and see if we can error. Yeah, okay. So I think I might be on a slightly older instance, which probably has different security things. It sounds like Sam got it to run. I'll give an example of this. I'll just record a little video on how this tool works for those of you that want to see it. Option, click, drag, copies nodes. Yes, okay, yep, cool. Yeah, so this will just give you a little bit more of a description of the image, and that might be helpful. Like, unlike clip interrogator, which gives you sort of like machine language stuff, this will give you more of a human read description, and that might help prompt you to like use a different prompt or something. So you could, again, plug this directly into your text node for your positive prompt, or you could plug it into the prompt combiner again. And you have a little bit of like more flexibility there. Sorry, this had worked for me, but I was on a different instance. It was on like a medium or large. So I feel like there's probably some like weird disconnect between some of these things. But this will just provide you a caption of what the image, what it sees in the image. Okay, so we'll skip that one. Now I want to talk about image to image. So as Golan mentioned, like one of the cool features of these tools is you can also pass an image into the model and say, start from this image. So the way this essentially works is if we think about our noising process, right? In a traditional denoising process, like we looked at last week, we start with full noise. We start with noise that is completely noisy, and then we slowly remove that noise. In this case, what we actually are doing is we're actually going to feed in a starter image. We're going to add a bunch of the noise to that image, and then we're going to denoise from there. And this allows us to basically do the denoising process, but also influence the early stages of our denoising. So here I've got a very poorly drawn dog riding a dolphin on a wave. And what we'll be able to do then is we'll say like, hey, start with this, and then slowly like add some noise to it, and then remove that noise. And as we remove that noise, we'll then be able to make alterations to our image. And just like we talked about steps last week, we can also think about this as a stepping process. If we add a lot of noise to this image and we denoise from there, we're gonna have a very different looking image than if we add just a little bit of noise and denoise that. So we'll look at how that works, but essentially this allows you to control how close your input image is to your output image, or I guess vice versa, how close your output image is to your input image. And this process in Comfy is super easy. It's 2 nodes and 1 setting, and you can have a ton of control with this. So let's take a look at this in Run Comfy now. So to do this, what we're going to do is actually we're going to replace our empty latent with a load image. So just so we use load image, we can actually just do this. Let's just use this Belson image. So we'll copy this and we'll paste it. And we can feed this image into a new latent. Now the problem here is that this latent is 512 by 512 and it's an empty. There's no input here for this. So what we're going to need instead is a different latent example. So we'll go to, actually what we need is what we call a VAE encode. So VAE encode. And you'll see the output of this is latent. And what the input is our pixels, which is our image. And we need to connect our VAE as well. And then we need to connect our latent to our latent image. And then what we need to do is we need to decide how much noise we want to add to this image. So at the bottom of our K-sampler here, we have a denoise setting. Denoise set to 1 means add all of the noise back to this image. which means when we run this, let's just run this once and see what happens. I got to delete that Moondream. Bye-bye. So we run this. It's going to keep messing with clip interrogator. Sometimes the caching system works in your favor, and then sometimes you forget that that wasn't cached, and then you wait for a while. There you go. Cool. Why does it need to reload this? That's weird. Maybe for the VE. Okay. So why, even though I set this to denoise of 1, which is fully denoised, does it still kind of look like this image? Kind of complicated because adding noise even over top of an image that already exists, even if you're adding the full noise back in, some of this image is going to influence that input. But if I set the denoise to 0.5, which means basically reduce the number of steps by half. So basically like use this image up until like step, if we've got 20 total steps, up until step 11, and then denoise it. We get an image that looks really close to this. Now, this is partly because, let's actually remove the clip interrogator here. Let's remove this part, and let's turn this back into our regular prompt. So to turn this back, that widget or that input back into a widget, we come down and we right click on the node and we go to convert input to widget, and we go convert text to widget. And let's just go, let's just say abstract image radiating lines. So let's see how much of an influence the image has versus the prompt which we fed through clip interrogator has. So here you see it's still pretty close. So this is because I've denoised this image about halfway through my steps. If I made this 0.9, which means like only 2 steps of denoising, it's going to look like almost the exact same image. Well, wait. Oh, no, sorry. 0.1. I inverted my numbers. 0.1, which means just 2 steps. You'll see you get back basically the exact same image. But you did see 0.9 or 0.8, which is like still a lot of noise, but like still keeping some of that shape. Gives me back something kind of similar. And this is probably more influenced by my prompt than by my noise. But you'll see the colors are kind of the same. Colors tend to be the thing that is always influenced when you use an image-to-image system. For whatever reason, as they add noise back in, the colors are still kind of influencing that noise. So you tend to get a lot of images that have the same colors. So it's kind of helpful. So let's try that example of the dolphin with the dog and see if that fixes anything. So I'm going to go back to my prompt of a dog riding a dolphin. And I'm going to go back to my image, which I sketched out earlier today, which is called Dog and It. My beautiful dog and a dolphin. And let's set the denoise to be, let's leave it at 0.8. That's sort of about, halfway between like completely obliterating the image and then trying to use this as an influence. And let's see what happens here. Whoa, I get some gnarly looking stuff. Also, we need to remove colorful from here. Let's try to add just a little bit to our prompt. So we'll do high quality, 4K photo. Let's try that. That's great. So it gives me a photorealistic dog on a really shitty sketch of a dolphin with a wave. So I think because I added that wave in, let's also add in here cresting waves. All right, so that gets worse, but that could be because of our noise. Let's turn our denoise down even more, or I guess up even more. So we're adding more noise into our image, which means it will take more steps to denoise, which means it might keep some of my brown and gray shapes. Yeah, so you can kind of see if you squint a little bit, you can see how the white influenced this, but then my grays and browns are kind of all over the place. So clearly this is still a shitty sketch, and I would probably need to improve this a little bit more to make it better. But this is also where, now that I've got this image, I could also start to use those masking tools, right? I could then say, hey, I want a dog in this space, I want a dolphin in this space, and I want a wave in this space. So using that masking tool could also allow me to sort of influence certain regions. So you can kind of start to see how you can combine all these things to have a really powerful tool. And I won't force us to go through all the remasking of things. Maybe if someone wants it, I'll share this image and we can try it, over the week. But you can see there's a lot we can do here. And maybe if I even have an image of what a dolphin or a dog look like, maybe it'll give me some, in clip interrogate, it'll give me some additional like words to think about and tools to play with. So you can see all these tools are kind of adding up in a really interesting way. One thing I want to do is let's go back to that that image to image generator. What was that? That was the masking tool, right? So let's go back to our mask workflow. Right, so let me just run this. Swing it back to that image we had. Cool, so we got a slightly different image, but it's still kind of nice. It still gives me a lagoon and some wheat fields. What if I want to improve on this image? What if it's like a good sketch, but like not yet exactly what I want, right? We can use the same concept behind the image tool to add another layer on top of this. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to copy our K-sampler. And we're going to take our latents and we're going to feed our latents directly out of this sampler back into a new K-sampler. This is image to image, but not using pixels. Remember that our latent output is like sort of a mathematic representation of an image, but it isn't pixels yet. So the cool thing here is like we can keep it sort of in the machine without converting it back to pixels. And then what we can do is we can run another K-sampler on top of it with a little bit of denoising. So for this, what we'll do is we'll connect our model again. And we'll collect our positives, positive prompts. Where my negative prompt go? Negative is here. And what we're going to do then is we're going to change our denoising. So let's change our denoising to, let's do 0.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to feed this image back into the system, and it's going to redraw this. But actually what we want to do, this is the mistake I made before. We don't want to use our masking this time. We want to make a new prompt. So let's do prompt clip text encode. And let's just combine these into all one phrase. So we're going to do this. So we're just going to take our prompt. They've kind of already combined. There's probably a way we could use the prompt combiner. Actually, let's do that. No, we're not going to do that because there's some duplicate phrases in here. So we kind of just made up our own manual new prompt. We're going to plug that into our positive. Basically, because if we did the masking again, it would just give us more hard edges. This is going to give us like a light, like retouching over the entire image. So we can just run this now. So what it's going to do is going to generate a new image for us. And then it's going to, oops, I didn't add, I didn't actually output it. So we'll need to copy our VAE decoder, plug this in, plug my VAE in, and then we're going to, let's actually move this one over here because this is our saved image. And then we're going to make a new node here. We're going to call it preview image. Preview image is nice because it doesn't actually save the file out. So if we just want to see the intermediate layer in Comfy, but we don't want to actually save out that file, we can do that here. So let's run this again. Why did that not re-render? Try something else here. Let's try this. Just try making a brand new case sampler. I'm just going to try this and see if this fixes anything for me. Get my model. Get my positive prompts. Oh, you know what? That's what I had an error here. I didn't see that error happening. It's off screen. My negative is actually over here. Okay, let's try this again. Cool, there you go. Whoa, that is way too much. Oh, it's because I added a new filter, which has a different. I need to switch this back to the regular case sampler. Sorry. What happens when I don't see error messages and I think I'm screwing something up. Do this all over again. Set this to 0.5 for the denoise. Positive, negative, model. So we can kind of see here, it's got super crispy. There's a way to fix this, and we'll look at that in just a second. But we can see is that we got our original image in, and then we changed the latents and we added another layer over top of it, which would hopefully blur in some of this stuff. So let's actually look at fixing this. So there's two ways to fix this sort of like crunchiness. First is to turn our CFG score down a little bit, and then the other is to change our steps here. So we'll change our steps to that, and then let's change our denoise to be maybe a little bit stronger. Let's do 6.5. Yeah, cool. So what's interesting here is how much the image changes, right? But what's nice about this is we actually we remove sort of that masking artifacting, right? We don't see as much of that mask, and now is like a much more seamless image. This is a really common technique you'll see quite often, where sometimes what people even do is they'll generate their base image in SD 1.5 because it's like faster. Then they'll generate their next image in SDXL by plugging it into a different model, which will give it more detail and actually upscale the image as well. Because SD 1.5 is 512 by 512. We could then plug this into a latent upscaler, and then you could upscale it, and then you could actually output a much larger image as well with more detail. So there's a lot of cool techniques you can do with this. If we turn our denoise down a little bit more, let's try 375, it should keep more of the base image. Yeah, so we lose our rocks a little bit here. We could always add in prompts or change out our negatives and our positive prompts here as well. But it's a nice way to sort of add another layer of detailing and also kind of remove some of that clear, like hard masking effect. But this is basically a second version of image to image. It just, instead of using an actual image input, it takes our latents and feeds them back into a new sampler. So there's a lot of different ways you could do this. And also, Golan, I know you mentioned, yeah, there's a really cool tool that Ben Fox, who I've known for a long time, has that uses P5, where you can make a little P5 node and then feed that into an image-to-image system as well. So there's lots of cool things that are happening here. Yeah, I haven't tried to run Comfy yet either. I wonder if, did he publish it? Let me see if I can even install it. Let's see if we can install it. I don't know if he published it to the node system yet, or if it's just directly available through him. Yeah, I don't think he had published it yet.
Is it possible to add unpublished nodes?
It is. You just have to manually install them. So in this case, what we'd have to do is go through, in Run Comfy, you'd have to go over here, and there is a shell. You could actually go through the command line and install it, like using pip or something. I don't know how I would have to look at his install stuff. We could install it directly through here in the shell. Or we could just tell him to publish it to Comfy manager system, and we could all access it that way. Yeah, so that is a good amount of sort of what we can do today. We only have 10 minutes left, so I actually don't think I'm going to cover LoRa's. What I'm going to do, though, is because I do want people to train a LoRa this week, if you're interested in it, I'll record a discussion about how LoRa's work. And then I already have all of the tutorials set up on how to actually make a LoRa. There are ways to make LoRa's directly in ComfyUI. It's a nightmare, and I don't recommend it. And in fact, the guy who has made the LoRa trainer inside of ComfyUI says they don't really work on cloud systems anyway. So what I actually recommend we do is there's 2 or 3 different versions of online tools to make LoRa's. They cost anywhere from a couple dollars to $30 to actually like make and export your LoRa. But I've got tutorials on every one of them right now. And what I'll do is I'll record another little like 20-minute video on how LoRa's work and explain like what I would recommend people try out. And I'll share that tonight. I'll do it after this session. I don't like people waiting around and me talking over our time because I know people have other things going on. So I'll record a short little video on that just to explain what LoRa's are. But LoRa's essentially allow you with a couple images to train your own model that you can then add into your own system. So next week we'll look at is we can add a model here. We can do a thing called LoRa loader. So what we can do is we can actually take our model tree and we can add this little LoRa, which is like a little plugin essentially that will allow us to create custom images that look like a data set of images that we have. So I'll explain that process. If you're interested, you can create your own LoRa this week. It only takes an hour or two, assuming you find 10 or 15 images you like. And then we'll cover how to run them through Comfy next week, as well as some other model things we'll look at next week. If you don't get to record it or don't get to train your own LoRa this week, but you are excited, maybe we can also share the LoRa's we make. I'll happily share some of the ones that I have. And then we can look at installing them, and then we'll look at how to use them in Comfy, because it's really fun. It used to be, I used to treat, I think Sean, you probably know this, but like I used to teach training classes for StyleGAN and things. They were like a 6-week class. It would take a month to train your model. And now we've gotten to a point where like in a couple hours, you can train a really like interesting model. So I'll cover the tutorials on how to do that this week as well. Yeah, so what sort of images? So let's talk about that really quickly. So most LoRa's either want to be, there are ways to, basically there are 3 types of LoRa's you can train. One is a face. So either your face or a friend's face, like just take photos from different angles, smiling, frowning, whatever. You can train it on an object. So if you have a particular object, like say you have a radio you really like and you want to input that into your models, you can do that. Most people do styles. So like if there's a particular painter you like, there's a particular artist you like, or you have your own styles you want to try to put into these models. Styles tend to be the one that I work with. So I can show you. Let me log in here real quick. I've actually done a lot of training in Eden. I think Eden's trainer, their LoRa trainer, is really good, like probably one of the best out there, but it's a little expensive to export your models from Eden. It costs $30. You have to sign up for one of their plans to get to it. But I've got some models here that I've trained. So I trained a model on, what is it called? This corporate Memphis style. I trained a style on that, so you get some weird fucking corporate Memphis images. I've trained it on like rocks and gems. I've trained it on like photos, like old vintage photos of flowers. But these are sort of the stylistic like ones where you're getting more of a style and aesthetic. But you can also train it on objects or people. So either one of those, pretty much every tool supports all 3, and they just change the parameters of the training setup a little differently. And the other thing I'll say is number of images. Usually about 20 is good. So if you have 20 images, that's great. If you have less than that, you can usually get away with it, especially if it's just your face. If you have more than that, that also works, but some tools have limits on how many images you can upload. And then resolution-wise, the key here is that you're going to use a base model and train on top of a base model. So if you want to use SD 1.5, the resolution for those images are 512 by 512. If you want to use an SDXL, you can, it's 1024 by 1024. Yeah, so those are usually the requirements for images. I'll record a little video that covers all of this, like what is a LoRa, how does a LoRa differ from other tools, and I'll share that tonight with everybody. And then again, training, once you have your image data set, it takes about an hour or 2 to train your model on most of these hosted services. There are also local versions and collab versions. I'll probably just emphasize the GUI versions, so they're just easier to use. If you really want to do a local or a collab version, I'll send you videos and tutorials on that as well. But I'd probably recommend some of these hosted services. Oh, so Sam, so the other models that you see here in anything that's in the load checkpoint section are often fine-tuned models. So you can type SDXL and you'll see that sort of they're like in a folder structure. So all of the SDXL models, these are all versions of SDXL, but they've been like fine-tuned. So I'll talk about fine tuning, but fine tuning is essentially actually changing the entire model based on the images you feed it. Whereas a LoRA is like a little plugin. They're much smaller. They're like 200 megabytes, whereas these models are like 6 gigabytes. LoRAs tend to work better, especially if you have a small data set. For these models, you need like thousands upon thousands of images and a lot of like time to train them, which is why I tend to avoid these. They're good if you've got the time and the data. And there are a lot of tools out there that will let you do fine tuning through them. But I like LoRa's because they're small and you can like, they're very easily uploadable, and you can have very different, like you have different styles and you can sort of like swap them in and out. So we'll cover more of that next week about like making sure you're using the right base model, connecting to the right LoRA and swapping them in and out, that sort of thing. Yes, it's actually Civitai. So Golan was asking like, what's cheap and what's easy, and I would definitely say it's the Civitai version. I've got a tutorial there for that as well. So these 3 tutorials are ones I've recorded. If you want to use Colab or local, then Koya SS is the other popular one, and there's a new one that's out that everyone loves. It's called One Trainer. I've only done one training through One Trainer. I will probably this week try to record some additional tutorials on how to use these, but I would say my go-to is Civitai. It's just the cheapest, and I know exactly. Yeah, I don't like sending people to Civitai, but it is the good thing about Civitai is that the trainer, you don't actually have to go through any of the crap that's in Civitai. You can kind of like just go to this URL, don't look anywhere else, and you can train in it. But yeah, it's annoying that it's the cheapest and best version I've seen out there. I will say I love Eden's, and I don't know, maybe if you ask you know, I don't know if you know Gene or Xander, if you ask them and say like, hey, it's for a class, can you give me export access? Maybe they'll let you. I love Eden's trainer. We'll actually look at this next week because they also do what's called textual inversions, which is another great way to get sort of a custom model for cheap. You can use it in their platform more or less for free for like just paying for generation credits. But if you want to export it, you have to pay for one of their plans, which is $30 a month. You can pay once and then export it and then cancel your plan. You still need to pay $30 to get it out once. I wish they would change that because I think they're really cool, and I think they'll be flexible on that. So if you just ask them and be like, hey, I've got a group of students that would love to use this, can we? They might be down to let you do that. Because yeah, I would rather not send people to Civitai, except it's still the cheapest and best option out there. So yeah. All right, cool. That will wrap up this week. So again, there's more videos for you to look through if you're interested. It's all in our syllabus, and I'll add this to our Slack channel as well if you're interested. And then I will cover another video on what LoRAs are and how to train them. And then you've got these tutorials for specific platforms as well if you're interested in that. So it'd be great, not a requirement, but if anyone is interested in training their own LoRA between now and next week, that'd be a great thing to have. I will share some of my LoRAs that I've trained as well. And then I'll probably record a video like end of this week on how to upload them. We'll look at uploading one in class just because it's kind of important to know how to do it. But we'll also like I'll share how to do that if you want to pre-upload a bunch of stuff beforehand. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. See you all next week. Also, there are Thursday Q&As, so if you're still interested in hanging out and talking about anything or have questions about any of this stuff, please attend those. They were really great last time. I learned a lot. I think everyone else learned a lot, so please attend those as well if you can.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks, sir.
Bye.
Oh.